Do you think that over the past decade or so that we've seen a noticeable change in the media's ability to do this because of having so fewer people, or is it maybe a bit overblown?
There's arguments on both sides. I mean, I think having people questioning people in power is always a good thing, right? And especially from diverse points of view. Rather, if everybody's doing the same thing all over, just asking the same question, it's not useful. So you need a diversity of voices asking those questions. One of the things I was going to say
Mhm.
too about having that many people in a premier's comms office and so few in a press gallery is politicians now are able to communicate directly through people, and so is everybody else. They don't have to go through traditional media to do it. They have social media that they can do that. They have their own websites. They can get their message across. The emphasis they used to have to put on how do we get our message out? How do we convince, Colin the reporter of the truth of our, of our statement and the wisdom of our approach? They don't really have to worry about that anymore because they don't really, if they don't have to go through Colin, they don't have to worry about it. They
Mhm.
can speak directly to people, and people can speak directly back to them on social
Mhm.
media, right? I mean, they're not actually speaking to the person, but they feel like they are. So there's an interaction
Mhm.
there
Mhm.
that leaves the media kind of without a dance partner, right? The
Mhm.
two people that communicated between, citizens and people in power are communicating. They're talking to each other over here, right? And they
Yeah.
can't get them. So I agree, but it's saying it is actually more complicated than than uh, than what a lot of journalists, with great respect, presume. Um, the,
Yeah.
the 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 truth of the matter is that for all of everybody else's purposes, journalists aren't as important as they used to be, right? In that
Yeah.
sense, so they have to find new ways of enhancing their proof. And I mean, I think Bob Fife and Steve Chase have done a great job doing that, right? So I don't want to be all negative Nelly about this sort of thing. And you need resources to do that sort of stuff. And the Globe and Mail has resources because it's taken a long-term, calm, patient approach to transitioning to the digital world. And it has owners who are among the richest people in the world and are dedicated to the
Mhm.
project. So they have something there that others don't have. And I think in Canada, we're really, really struggling a lot through to make this transition, a lot through the ownership structure of our newspapers. Radio is, another area that we talked about, and it has its own challenges too. Except it's been able to shift online, and there's over 700 commercial radio stations in Canada, and each of them has a website, which has turned each of them essentially into a publisher. And they've been in
Mhm.
small towns killing weekly newspapers faster than Facebook has. That's for sure.
Mm. Oh, that's interesting. And you make an interesting point too about politicians being able to communicate directly to citizens by firing out a tweet or Facebook post and so forth. I want to ask you just briefly, and we'll touch upon it in the next segment too, but about the CBC. I mean, it's a huge part of Canada's media industry. It receives over $1 billion a year in subsidies. Some people say it should be privatized and just get rid of it. There's no role for the government to run a media outlet. Other people come at the issue from a very different perspective, saying, no, we need to reform it. It's important to keep and so forth. Could you tell us about, for about 30 seconds or so, roughly, where you came down on this issue?
Sure. I think the country needs a public entity, used to call them broadcasters like the CBC, producing news and entertainment and promoting Canadian content on its entertainment platforms and sports and that sort of stuff, if it's into that. I have no objection to that, and I really don't have a great deal of objection to the subsidy. What I do have an objection to is that we are not subsidizing a public broadcaster. Everybody talks about the CBC and says, do we need a public broadcaster? Well, yes, we do, but the CBC isn't one. It's a commercial entity. It competes with commercial news platforms online and over the air, and it should stop because it's a disruptive force and hurting us.